view
This
of it.
conference will now be recorded.
Oh, sorry. And again, the county is really in charge of what that development's going to look like, and BWD is got its role in terms of infrastructure and supplying services, but it's primarily driven by the county. So, thanks very much.
Well, that's preamble. We would like our T2 friends here who've come to talk about the Ramsey plans to give us an update. Shannon, do I just turn this over to you?
Yeah, I'm going to start a little bit if that's okay.
Absolutely.
We'll get a slide deck going up here as well. I'll do my best.
Esmeralda, could you give us our first slide for Ramsdale? Thank you.
Let me just do a little technical check.
I can't quite see.
Jessica, am I anywhere near where I'm supposed to be?
You know, I can take care of that.
You can make me 6'4"?
I'll do my best.
I would love to be
Can you
taller.
mark it? No.
Let me come over.
I'll zoom it into the ear and then.
That's fine. Okay, I hope I'm in the general vicinity there. Great.
No.
Tell them to me.
And
Yeah,
as well.
so Shannon, just before you start, for remote folks, if you could please mute, just because it gets really noisy in here, and, you know, some folks, accidentally create extra words for us. So if you're remote, if you could please mute, and then I will work with Jessica if you have questions to, give you an opportunity to speak. So thank you, and Shannon?
Wonderful. I have some prepared remarks here that I'll operate from start. But we're going to have several of us that are going to speak this morning to try to give you an insight into Rams Hill. Many of you in this room are very familiar faces and are obviously interested in what is going on at Rams Hill. And those of you that are online as well, this may be a first time that you've had a chance to hear directly from Rams Hill. Again, my name is Shannon. Shannon Smith. I've been coming to Borrego since 2012 and was involved with the original purchase of Rams Hill by its current ownership, and others to come in a moment. So just as a little introduction, I would like to say that we should have a cupcake here with a candle in it because we celebrated our first decade of ownership of Rams Hill last July. And so with that happening, we are now the single longest tenured owner of the Rams Hill development in its history. So I just would like to point that out as we begin. So it just seemed like the right thing to do, just look over our shoulder real quickly for that last 10 years and what has happened during that last 10 years as we prepare for the development in the future. So first I'd like to offer that with respect to water, we've got a proven history of conservation and forward planning around water. Rams Hill was the first pumper in the basin to fully offset its new uses in the basin by following old uses before it began, thereby protecting the aquifer and not contributing to its overdraft. Rams Hill was the first pumper in the basin to become fully transparent with public disclosure of our water quality and water quantity data. And Rams Hill provided the first monitoring well in the agricultural area to the north at the Fortner site, followed by an additional well in the northern management area, and also including the most recently drilled DWR well there on the Giorgio Road at the Bernand tract that we own. As well, we reduced the annual Gulf irrigation water 36% as compared to what those that came before us were using. Historically, those that came before us were using 1,250 acre-feet of water a year. Even had 1 year it peaked at 1,750 acre-feet in that year. But we reduced it 35% from 1,250 down to roughly 800 acre-feet a year now. And we did all of this at a time before it was state law and before the judgment was in place, but done in collaboration with the BWD under our long-term cooperation agreement. Rams Hill was one of the instrumental parties, along with the Borrego Water District, in delivering the judgment that provides certainty for water rights and certainty for sustainable management of our basin after decades of conflict with not a lot of progress is now resolved. Rams Hill, upon reopening in 2014, reopening of the golf course in 2014, installed a sophisticated computerized irrigation system to make our watering more efficient. And to continue with water conservation, we most recently began our multi-million-dollar, multi-year process for the grassing renovation of the existing Rams Hill Golf Course. That grass conversion alone is projected to save approximately 25% water as compared to its prior uses with the prior grass types. And just to make sure it's clear, and I think Jeff and Steve did a good job of making it clear, but the public needs to be aware and know that Rams Hill is going to limit its water use only to its allocation under its judgment that it owns, and it has and will continue to comply with all the ramp down requirements of the judgment separately. With respect to the Borrego Water District, Rams Hill has got a proven history of cooperation and partnership with the BWD. At our inception of acquiring Rams Hill, we cured the delinquent standby fees and the Melrose bond fees that prior owners had not paid. It improved the Borrego Water District's financial condition and credit rating at the time we acquired Rams Hill, and have since paid those fees on an ongoing basis and restructured those bonds that were in default. We also entered into, and I mentioned a moment ago, the long-term cooperation agreement with the Borrego Water District to ensure that our uses were sustainable, transparent, and cooperative with the BWD. Our predecessors constructed the wastewater treatment plant here in Borrego that now serves not only Rams Hill, but the town center ratepayers and protects the aquifer from potential quality impacts from enhanced septic uses. Rams Hill provides the only certain avenue today to add new ratepayers to the Borrego Water District's customer base and size. Plus, it's the only major project not in the floodplain and connected to the wastewater treatment plant. Adding more customers in Rams Hill would appreciably and positively impact ratepayers by growing and stabilizing the customer base. With respect to our teammates, many of you are in the room here today. We support our workers and their families as members of this Borrego Springs community. Rams Hill was the first employer in the basin to increase starting wages to $16 an hour, which is greater than the minimum wage at that time. We have implemented the abilities for all employees to work year-round, avoiding the family stress of seasonal employment. We provide benefits, including health insurance, paid holidays, vacation, English as a second language, college scholarships, Rams Hill Hugs, many of you have heard of before. And this summer, we added a new program whereby we offer lunches in the summer. Most importantly, we have Friday Family Day lunches at Rams Hill during the summertime. We offer a growing workforce that celebrates internal promotion opportunities, some of which are in the room and some of which are back at Rams Hill today. When we turn to natural resources, Rams Hill has demonstrated a commitment to sustainably managing its property and its business. The first thing we did early on was we installed a 1 megawatt solar array at Rams Hill to offset our power uses with these renewable sources. We have researched and continue to explore battery storage opportunities to further employ sustainable power uses. We have an electric fleet of golf carts only that are used on the course today, as well as new equipment is brought forward by manufacturers that are electric only. We've invested in those, and we got our first piece of equipment in this summer, and the industry continues to convert to sustainable sources of power and that equipment. We're in the midst of contracting for electric chargers for on-site guest use, and we certainly have been a partner of the Borrego Foundation of the Park since we got to town. With respect to community in total, we've been active both behind the scenes and a touch, we think, a contributor in a positive way. We've established involvement in and support of a number of Borrego institutions. The Little League, including the girls softball team, the Lady Bobcats, OAX, Children's Center, Borrego Ministers Association, Chamber of Commerce, Village Association, the Borrego Springs Music Festival, Borrego's teachers, and Rams Hill established a program called For the Love of Borrego program, where we contribute a portion of the proceeds from our golf house rental program each year to uses and causes here in Borrego. The amount is in addition to the occupancy taxes we pay to the county, and that amount has been increasing each year, and past recipients have included, as they did this year, Borrego Ministers Association, OAX, opposition to the SPP placement in Borrego, and other community causes. We've also engaged in annual projects to support the physical needs of our schools. We painted classrooms, many of you are here, painted classrooms, and I recall that well, leading to a better learning environment and providing meaningful work for our teammates during these summer months. We also provided water to our elementary school in support of their athletic field uses, along with advice from Willie and his team concerning how to better and more efficiently manage irrigation there at the elementary school. We provided this last year a peak of 93 jobs in recreation and hospitality, which is a stable and meaningful employment for the families that are critical to reversing the trend of declining enrollment in our school system here in Borrego. We bring more and more visitors to Borrego each year, and that increase in visitors helps the park and secures Borrego as a welcome destination that celebrates and honors its park setting. It seems best that our teammates may offer a few comments here, many of whom actually grew up here in Borrego, and they will give their comments here a little bit later in our presentation. But for now, I will mention the others that are going to speak for you today here. First is Kathy Milkey. Kathy is our Senior Vice President at Rams Hill. Kathy was involved integrally in the acquisition of Rams Hill in 2012, and has been a regular face in Borrego since that time. Secondly, I would say that Mark Lindman is not with us today, but he's on Zoom. He is our development consultant, that's been involved since 2012, but unfortunately he came down with a case of COVID, which is still not left us, and we thank him for not being with us today, but is available online as well. Lastly, and I'm very excited, because many of you don't yet know Rodney Bruce. Rodney joined us as our Director of Development and Construction here at Rams Hill, and most importantly, he brings with him to Borrego, Peria in the back, his wife, Summer, a wonderful daughter, and Silas, a wonderful son. And so they are now residents here in Borrego full-time, and look forward to their involvement, and I know he and his family look forward to getting to know you all. So,
Sheriff, I think, Esmeralda, could you flip this slide, please? And the board has a hard copy of this. Shannon spoke earlier about how Rams Hill is a part of the Borrego community, and in the spirit of a picture says, the picture's worth 1,000 words, we've got some pictures here for you of our team, of our involvement with Little League, of our new water quality monitoring well in the northern management area, of our solar array at Rams Hill. And I just wanted to take a minute and point that out.
very good, thanks.
Yep.
Very good.
And then, Esmeralda, you can go to the next slide. Thanks. Okay.
Wonderful. So if I'm on the right side now, yep, I'm on the sponsor side, yeah. So Rams Hill is known as Rams Hill, but it's also known by the entity that owns it. The entity that owns Rams Hill is T2 Borrego LLC, which you'll hear from time to time, we may simply call it T2. You hear other people refer to it as that. So let's just take a minute and understand who T2 is. Some of us asserted that T2 is some big corporate American conglomerate of sorts, but let's be clear about who T2 is and who T2 is not. First of all, T2 Borrego is a majority woman-owned business that's actually led by a fifth-generation San Diegan by the name of Terry Constantine. Believe it or not, Terry visited St. Richard's as a young child for Mass because his family had a ranch in San Felipe, and so Borrego is not and was not unknown to him by the time that he came here and invested in Rams Hill. He actually moved later on to Valley Center and went to school in Valley Center in Escondido in his younger years. I'm going to say the next thing twice about T2. T2 is financially stable with no debt. T2 is financially stable with no debt. And so many have questioned at time to time what our commitment is, even though we've been here for 10 years. And hopefully the fact that we can say that we are financially stable with no debt gives you an understanding of how committed T2 is to being a partner in Borrego. As for who Terry is, I would say Terry has been married for 46 years to his wife, Betsy. They're actively involved in philanthropy, education reform, and ranching in western Colorado. After being a fifth-generation San Diegan, he currently lives in Colorado. But most of all, they enjoy 3 adult children, their spouses, and 4 amazing grandchildren. I'm in my 23rd year of working with Terry Constantine to solve problems and do good work where he and his family chooses to invest. T2 values our relationships, long-term relationships with our employees, our teammates, and the communities in which we work. So T2 has a very long-term view for Rams Hill. We took the first 10 years following its rescue as a severe depressed golf course and return to sand. We waited until there was a sustainable water regime in place before we decided to move forward. And T2, I would note, has a commitment to quality in what we do. And I say quality, but it's certainly not mine. It's a lot of the hands that are in this room here today that make Rams Hill a special place for those that are golf aficionados. The accolades are many, most recently being increased to the 91st best public course course you can play in the United States by Golf Digest, the gold standard of measuring quality of golf courses. So that's a touch on T2. Because Mark Lemon is not with us here today and is recovering, I'm going to try to do a poor substitute just to remind everyone what our current entitlements are. And so Rams Hill in total is almost 3,200 acres in size. Rams Hill, it was approved back in 1980 for 1,570 total homes, golf course and commercial, 2 golf courses and commercial uses. And it was also revised in 1986. Further, we came forward to the San Diego County Board of Supervisors and received a development threshold approval in 2020, pursuing the plans that we are discussing here today. Over our history, approximately 265 homes have been built on these lots by others, and prior developers actually went bankrupt and failed, as many of you know. As a reminder, we acquired this property in 2013, and we reopened the golf course in 2014.
And Esmeralda, there's a slide for this, if you could switch.
Yeah. There we go. So as a reminder here on the slide deck, it cites these key data points, but as well to note that all of our planning to date stays with our existing entitlements, which were 1,570 homes, 350 hotel rooms, and a specific amount of acreage for golf, and a specific amount of acreage with respect to commercial uses. And we're not looking to change any of those quantities. So as you hear us talk, there won't be anything that is more intense or denser in development than what was previously approved. As well, as I said, we will keep the same amount of golf acreage that the county originally approved. And as a reminder, we have major use permits for 2 golf courses today. So let's see, what have I missed here so far?
I think that's
Did I
it.
miss anything on the list? I think that's got it. But again, we own the Rams Hill golf course. We own surrounding and abutting expansion land, but there are other people in Borrego that own individual lots within Rams Hill. We don't own every single lot, nor do we own every single home in Rams Hill today. But we consider ourselves entrusted with taking Rams Hill to the next step. Kathy, you want to give up?
Yeah.
Before you start, Kathy, I think there's one thing for the community to better understand, in that you're not building homes, you're selling a developed lot. Is that correct?
Well, we have the opportunity to do both, and it's hard to tell exactly what will happen. You know, the future is very difficult to predict, Dave, and certainly I would say we would be open to either, and being in business, whichever path flowed the best at the time, where the demands were, we would offer.
Well, I certainly have my questions about what you're actually doing, and it's never been exactly clear. I just assumed that you were developing the lots, but it sounds like that you have or will consider actually building as well. So that's good for the community to understand.
Yeah, it very well could be that as we have talked before, the exact rate of absorption, meaning how many homes could be sold in any one year, is an unknown to us all. And to the extent that those numbers are smaller, it makes it more likely that we'd be engaged in home construction directly. And probably the best testament I can give you about that possibility will come a little later in the presentation, but as well, this gentleman standing to my right is a construction guy.
Okay, thank you.
He knows how to do it.
Yeah, thanks. And Dave, that's a good bridge, because the next thing we want to talk about is why are we asking for an amendment to our plan at all? And, you know, the why is that the original 1980s plan was really centered around a golf course. It was golf focused. There were homes on the golf course. This was a design that could be anywhere. It's a design that has failed iteratively here in Borrego, here at Rams Hill. Borrego's a special place, and we want to honor that. We understand the concerns of our long-term Rams Hill neighbors, and our plan is more stable and more feasible than the old plan. As the longest tenured owner of Rams Hill, we see a need and an opportunity to serve different market segments while honoring the development commitments made to existing homeowners. The amendments to our land plan will modernize it for today's home buyers and align with their, and hence our, priorities. We're looking for homeowners that desire to live in the desert in harmony with their natural surroundings, and we need time to develop Ramsdale in phases. It's no secret that if we were to put up 1,000 homes tomorrow, people wouldn't come to town to buy them, right? We need to do this in an order so that the community can absorb them. One change we desire from the current land plan is that we envision a new development that has desert landscaping, larger lots, and is more sustainable. It will blend with our beautiful surroundings and have a lighter impact than a neighborhood with swimming pools and lots of. We aren't trying to create a mini Palm Springs. We're asking to move our original entitlements on land that we own across a larger portion of our land while still protecting habitat and other special areas in order to create new neighborhoods that will be appealing and successful. We believe that separating with off activity by allowing public play and not depending on homeowner memberships is the right plan to avoid the harsh consequences our predecessors and our Ramsdale neighbors have experienced. Our future plans do not add any more homes than what the county originally approved. You can see that on this slide here. Our future plans do not increase the commercial uses or acreage. Our future plans do not increase the golf course uses or acreage. Our future plans do not increase the water usage beyond what the county originally approved. None of the changes we propose will result. Can somebody mute?
That's mine, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Harry. None of the changes we propose will result in any cost or burden to BWD's current ratepayers. As you heard Shannon say earlier, we have been a positive force in Borrego community since we arrived. We believe in Borrego and have tried, and I think have helped the community, both behind the scenes and in some more public ways. In addition to the past and current benefits you've already heard about, we have proposed various extraordinary community benefits as part of our package with the county. The BWD is not voting on these benefits, but because it is important to many in the community and it's important to our workforce, I wanted to take a minute to make sure that Rodney Bruce could talk about that. Rodney's our new Director of Construction and Development, and he's working on one of the benefits that's off-site that we are particularly excited about. Rodney? And will you flip this slide, Esmeralda? Please. Thanks. Okay.
So one of the challenges that me and my family had when we moved out here was finding housing. As you guys know who live here, there's not a lot of inventory out there. There's definitely not a lot of rentals out there. And so we understood that as the current need for our workforce or our team members and then our future as well. So one of my core responsibilities will be to provide and build workforce sustainable housing. Much of what I'll be doing will be off-site of the Ramsdale property, but nevertheless, or more importantly, the idea is that we build something sustainable and that blends into the natural landscape and the natural architecture here in Borrego. The idea that we had was to build straw bale homes. For those of you who are not familiar with straw bale homes, basically what they are is stick-framed buildings that are kind of infilled with straw bales and then encapsulated with natural plaster. Ultimately, this creates a healthier, more cleaner indoor environment for the inhabitants, for people who live inside. Sustainable materials, and more importantly, it's more resistant to the climate fluctuations of the desert. The cold winters and the hot summers will have more of a nice ambient, even temperature. And so all of our homes, our workforce homes, will be have solar paneling to lower electrical costs. So as we know, I'm dealing with the electrical bill right now. I think it's going to be upwards of $1,000 just to cool the home. So I'm sure some of you guys are there with me with some of these utilities. So solar housing or solar panels is going to be really important to help keep the cost of the utilities down. We understand that at the time, home ownership isn't really kind of a natural thing. It isn't intuitive. So we're going to also provide home buyer education to educate people on especially our first-time home buyers, on what it takes to maintain a home and budget for a home. So financial literacy will come along the way. Not everyone's going to be ready immediately out the gate. We'll be working with our team members to, lower debt-to-income ratios, fixed credit scores, and whatnot. But ultimately, what we plan on doing is providing a fee-simple home ownership that allows for our homeowners, our team members, to generate wealth and pass it on along to their heirs. And ultimately, again, like I mentioned, not everyone's going to be ready right out the gate. So we're going to have to cultivate a home for rent program as well. Again, all of this is going to be done to alleviate a lot of, a lot of what's going to be happening. A lot of this is going to be done to alleviate the pressure, people buying up existing, inventory. We're going to be putting more inventory out there so it doesn't continue to increase the cost of housing here in Borrego, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Very good, very, very helpful. Before we kind of come through with our ask of the district piece and entertain additional questions that the board or the public may have, is there any of our teammates that want to add to this discussion at this time?
Hello, my name is Carmen, and I'm currently working for Rams Hill. I'm working the administration office. And I've witnessed how Rams Hill does support our community. I'm currently also part of OLAC, and they've supported us in establishing this club in Borrego, and we're very grateful. Our coworkers are very grateful for the support that Rams Hill does for our community. We speak on behalf of our Latin community. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, my name is William Lopez, and I'm local superintendent in Rams Hill. One of the challenges that we have, especially for me, I commute every day from La Quinta, Indio. So it's me and my wife, we've been coming up here, trying to find a place to live, to buy. We can't find anything. So basically, she tells me, you know what? I'll move to Borrego to buy me a new house. So as you know, that's something that we're trying to, hopefully we can accomplish with, when we get our housing for Rams Hill. And also a lot of my team workers, I have about 20, 25 employees that most of them live in mobile homes. And it's kind of hard for them to live in a mobile home with 2, 3 kids. So that's something that I hope we get so we can help their families. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Are you gonna talk about where the homes are going to be built?
Most of the homes that we'll be building will be off-site. Right now, we have 2 prototype homes that we're planning moving forward with in Deepwell, in the Deepwell area, Sewanee Drive, if you're familiar with that.
About the Borrego Springs Resort, we've heard rumors that T2 has bought that area, but.
Be happy to answer that question. It's no secret to the district, and I think the paper actually got it wrong. We don't own it yet, is what I would tell you. Do we, Scott? No. Okay, we don't. So Scott vouched for it. We don't own it yet. But T2 has long been the contract purchaser of Borrego Springs Resort. For those of you that have studied it closely, know that there is a very serious code violation at Borrego Springs Resort with the county that has created innumerable challenges, and that is something that has to be resolved satisfactorily. And this is an issue that was created not by even the current owner of BSR, and certainly we as the new owners don't want to inherit, if you will, a sin of the past. And so we want to make sure that it is corrected and those issues are resolved. So that's close. It has not been resolved yet, but it is closer than it's been in the last 3.5 years. I can tell you today, very close. And that is an area where there is a possibility. And as we think about placing workforce housing close to schools, churches, libraries, and infrastructure, those are things that come to mind. And there are a total of 84 finally mapped lots at BSR today that are, not subject to floodplain issue, as I'll say, or outside of that particular issue, that we will be owners of, when the closing occurs.
And then the hotel rooms, are some of those the Borrego Springs Hotel?
That is a part of the Borrego Springs Resort. It's the single largest hotel in town, 100 rooms.
So you're planning on having some of those 300 some hotel rooms be the Borrego Springs Hotel?
The entitlements for Borrego Springs Resort are separate and are a part of Borrego Springs Resort, and there's 100 units, 100 rooms there today.
Right.
There, I think their plan actually allows for an additional 100 to be built or something. You notice that? Yeah. We don't have any plans to expand the Borrego Springs Resort Hotel.
But you're planning on actually having that be part of the hotel rooms that you're talking about?
It's
No.
separate from
It's separate.
from the Rams Hill Hotel room. Those entitlements are separate. Good question.
Well, and you might be relieved, Gina, Diane, Tammy, Dave, we're gonna wrap up here. And so, Esmeralda, if you could go to our last slide. I just want to thank the BWD for having been in these discussions with us, and actually, we began these discussions with prior boards. So thanks to them for their service, and thanks to our current committee, which is Tammy and Dave, and also to Jeff Poole, who's been working with us a lot as we've been talking about what's going on at Rams Hill. This is something we've been talking about with the current board since before COVID. And so we're happy to be here today and share more about our project. That the BWD asked us to come and speak to you and speak to them in general. But it's important to note that our ask, as Steve, the lawyer, presented earlier, is not a land use approval. It's not today. We're not talking to the BWD about our land use approval. We're not asking for an endorsement of our development. Rather, we're asking for standard county forms that will accompany our application. As the only local water district, BWD has an obligation to provide service to customers within its service area, and all of Rams Hill is within the service area. We understand it's important to the BWD to ensure water and sewer service is available in a manner that is safe and reliable to all of its existing customers and to Rams Hill. We can't agree more. We will cover the cost for BWD's analysis and review of our engineering data. We understand and will pay for improvements needed to serve our new customers. We will tender appropriate water rights, which is BPA for those of you who know the lingo, to the BWD in order to serve the new Rams Hill customers. In sum, our ask of the BWD is that we want to increase your customer base. We need your timely review of impacts to the current system so we can move forward, budget for necessary improvements, and ensure that our public utility needs will be reliably met. The Water District has requested a memorandum of understanding, a written document for a future agreement between us and the BWD. We'll continue those discussions probably as early as today, and we look forward to moving forward together. Shannon, anything else?
No, I just iterating that we appreciate very much how important it is to have a strong, healthy, and responsible water district, and we appreciate the leadership that you all have shown, and prior boards have shown, and the easiest punctuation mark I can say is back when the long-term cooperation agreement was set up by the Borrego Water District, and its relationship with T2 sort of foretold what was going to be required in the future in order to sustainably manage our water. We had to offset our uses and bring our own water, and that was the theme then that the board established, and that is what's now codified in law. So we look forward to moving forward with our processes with the county, because nothing happens overnight, as we all know going through this process, and nor will the development activities happen overnight. It's going to be something that's going to occur over a longer period of time. As we all know, I think at the height, maybe there was 1 year there were 40 building permits pulled in Borrego, but I think during the peak home building years, it's about 20. And so, something like that, yeah. That's what I would call the data to be. So it's not like there's going to be 1,000 new homes built in the next 2 years. It's simply not going to be possible there. But we hope this has been informative for you. We look forward to answering questions that you have. So, Madam Chair, as you choose, how would you like to proceed?
Well, thank you, Shannon, Rodney, and Kathy. I'll open it up to the directors, which is sort of the normal flow of things, to ask questions, and then to the public. So directors, do you have any questions?
I do not.
I just had one question about the off-site housing. Is that gonna be a separate permit, or is that part of it? With the county?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll bring the BPA to that, obviously.
You got
How
it.
many homes are you thinking on that off-site?
It's hard to tell exactly what the right number will be, but if you think about sizing, the math you can do is that we have 93 employees was our peak employment this year, which places us as probably second, but in ranking, I think, number 2, second largest employer in town. And, we're looking forward to be number 1. And through that process of getting number 1, if we grow as we would plan, it's pretty easy to think that we should double our workforce. And so if there's 90 people and there's 4 people in the house, that means 360 bedrooms. I don't know. Could it be that many? It could be that many. And so, Gina, it'll be an element that is going to be demand driven, but when you try to think about what's logical and practical, if we do move forward again with re-energizing the second golf course activity and having more visitors and having more lodging in town, all of that's going to drive hospitality jobs, and so that hopefully people will increase their average length of stay in Borrego, and all of that will have ancillary benefits to the rest of the business community in Borrego as well.
And I would just add, because I'm not sure we were clear about this earlier, when thinking about workforce and sustainable housing, we are also thinking about that, not just for the Ramsdale workforce, but also for other locals. So teachers and our firefighters and other public service providers also need. Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate that. It's always been hard to keep people in Borrego for employment because they're housing it.
And park rangers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question on timing. I think I've heard rumors both ways that you would start with a hotel and then, or start with the second golf course and then try to build more houses. What is your thinking?
Yeah, I can tell you, like all thinking, it's subject to better facts and new information, so it changes. And it changed certainly from where we stood in 2014 to what we think is actionable today. And what we know is actionable today is that there seems to be an insatiable demand for quality destination golf activities. As a result, we believe that we currently fill up our existing course in season on the weekends, and as a result, there is demonstrated demand for more tee times, if you will, more availability for the right kind of golf experience. The other element of the right kind of golf experience, which is different than what many of you know as, I'll call it country club or a residential neighborhood golf course, is destination golf is a place where people like to go on vacation with their close friends. And so just like those of you that might prefer to camp or hike, you do it in a group with your friends and your close friends. In this case, golfers, there's fringe people, but they do that as well. And the idea of having on-site lodging and having it not in a hotel format, but in something that's more of a, I don't want to overuse the word casitas format, but something that's in a cottage or casitas format that allows for very close friends that are out experiencing wide open spaces together, have a chance to convene together and essentially live in a cottage environment. And so that we believe is actionable today. Some people may remember that we actually tendered some water to the district at the time, and we started down the path of building this kind of lodging before we all understood how critical the water crisis was going to be, and before we solved that issue, and we actually set time out and stopped until we got that done. So that's always been on our plan, and we know that that can be done in very small increments. You're not going to see 100 rooms. That's not the size at which we would build. It's not in our economic interest to do so.
Can you remind us, please, I think there was a second golf course at T2 that hasn't been in play, is that?
Yeah, there are major use permits for 2 golf courses that exist today at Rams Hill. And the specific plan provides for 346.37 acres of golf. That's what's in the entitlements today. And so that is something, as Kathy said earlier, we're not proposing that we change. We are living within what the existing entitlement is. And so those major use permits, there's two of them. One that's referred to as the south course, if you will, the south major use permit, and it reflects the course as we know today with respect to Fazio course. The second is the northern course, if you will, and our desire is to make not to pursue the exact design that was done at that time in 1980 whatever, which was designed to support housing sales. The answer is we believe destination golf is the right answer, and so we want to tweak that design, although living within the same entitlements as to golf acres that we have today.
And Diane, you're right that some of those holes were constructed. There's sort of a ghost of a golf course on part of our property. Yeah.
But you have 18 playable now, right?
Correct. The Fazio course is 18 holes, yes.
Right.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Sort of two parts. Some people have asked me and expressed concerns about whether this is a good business plan. When T2's endeavor to do all this makes sense, and if it doesn't, then perhaps T2 would get partially through constructing it and then abandon it and walk away. In one part, the water district doesn't have an opinion about your business plan. It's not our position to have an opinion about it, nor do we have an opinion about Dollar General or anything like that. That's not our position. But to the extent there are some people who have concerns about the possibility this may not make sense financially and that T2 would walk away from it, can you speak to all about why you have confidence that this plan makes sense for us, given Borrego?
Sure, I'll give a shot in that multi-part question, and Kathy, remind me if I'm missing one of the parts of the question. But yes, we do have great confidence that this plan will be successful. That comes from a couple places, but it starts first with the right sponsorship. And again, T2 is sponsored by a family that has chosen to do everything they've done to date with no debt. And so you can have a lot of dreams, but do you have the financial wherewithal to carry them out? And so maybe after a decade of working hard at it, everybody will come to understand that we're not going anywhere. Again, it is something that we're dear to. But let's talk about the business itself. One of the things that we had done, and I've been remiss today not to mention Harry Turner, our COO and GM, is in the room here with us today. And Harry is later in his career. Is that too objectionable to say? Maybe not.
45 years.
He's been at it for 45 years, involved in the golf business. He brings a particular set of expertise that also includes golf course development and resort development activities, including in the valley next door to us there. So and I'm going to forget it, Harry. The one with the little hotel with it.
Hotel with Borrego.
There it is. Yeah. A few years back. And so we have the expertise in-house to diagnose and develop these business plans that are related to, in this particular case, destination golf. And destination golf fits well, very well, with Borrego. And the reason it fits very well with Borrego is because people that go on a destination golf experience are not watching their watch and trying to get done in 2.5 hours or 3 hours. They are there with close friends and family. It's almost comparing that, well, people that like to hike, well, they can walk along the waterfront in San Diego, or they can walk out here in Borrego and take one of 3 different meandering paths through the state park. It's that kind of difference. And so we believe that destination golf fits well with Borrego, and we went and found some examples in other similarly situated communities where it makes great sense.
And Shannon, I think it's important to add not just destination golf, but remote destination golf, which even better fits our current location here in Borrego.
That's a very good point. So that would be the difference between La Costa is a destination golf, arguably a resort, much different than remote destination golf, which is Round Hill. I'm going to read out some towns to you, a total of 5 here. Brewster, Washington, situated on the Columbia River in eastern Washington State. Population 2,370. Bandon, Oregon. Population 3,321. Rome, Wisconsin. Population 2,720. Valentine, Nebraska. population 2,737. And lastly, Roscommon, Michigan, population 981. These are all small, remote destination towns. And in this case, at least based on the data that's reported, reports that Borrego has a population of 3,429. That's census data that may not be perfect, but it's pulled from the same sources, so don't hold me to the exact number. But in each case that I name these areas, these are very small towns that actually have multiple golf courses that are destination oriented golf courses. And there are also locations that are ranked nationally in peer reviews, and so people go and seek out these locations that in many cases take them a lot longer to get to than it takes to get to Borrego, believe it or not. And so out of that exercise, the question is, why is that a business? That's because friends enjoy being with friends and creating memories together, and that's what destination golf is about. It's vacationing together and enjoying a sport that you've oftentimes played with your father, your grandfather, and your son. And economically, in terms of rates, it's hard to believe, but of these small town locations that I just named, I'll read down what it costs for one person to pay one round of golf at those locations on weekend. Brewster, Washington, $255. Bandon, Oregon, $350. Rome, Wisconsin, $275. Valentine, Nebraska, $299. Roscommon, Michigan, $215. And we at Rams Hill this last year were at $215 for weekend golf. So hopefully that helps Tammy answer the question about, is there a business model, or is this something that's never been done before? And the answer is it's been done iteratively, and it's been done in small town settings where these activities and this hospitality was quite complementary to the adjacent town. Those are some examples.
And Shannon, I'd add one point, in case we weren't clear on it. What we learned when we were examining this model and doing our research is that these courses are successful when there's at least two. Having a destination where you play one course and then you're done for the day isn't enough to draw the kind of consumer who stays in town, really enjoys the town and the activities. And so all of those locations have two or more golf courses, which is why that's important to us.
So think about the state park had one trail. Okay, one and done. No, the answer is let's enjoy multiple. So a different way is a good way to frame that. Did I get anywhere close to your question?
Yeah, and again, this is not the water district's purview. We don't express an opinion about business plans. That's not our job, but just because it's come up, thank you for at least speaking to that topic.
And would you mind adding on, in the same vein, what are the age demographics that you're seeing of golf?
Yeah, and it's been interesting for us, especially when we have to divide it into two buckets, is the way I think about it. And we have a significant amount of drive-in business where we have been able to draw a lower age demographic out of what I'm going to call the LA market. Harry, is that the right way to describe it? Yeah. San Diego up to Yeah. But golf traditionally is and has always been those that play most frequently are older. And that has been the case generally with golf. But sort of post-COVID, we got a 20% bump in play nationwide in golf activities thanks to COVID that hasn't yet gone away. Anything more you want to add to that, Harry?
No, you know, the demographic is changing. It is getting somewhat younger, but it's been very, very strong the last 3 years. The COVID bump that the golf industry thought that they were going to experience and then see a decline on the backside. The golf industry as a whole, and Rams Hill in particular, has not seen that backside decline.
Thank you. Thanks.
Gina?
Yeah, one more question. So before you can move forward with any of this, I mean, I know what the water district's responsibilities are, but you do need a change in use or something from the county approval. I mean, you couldn't just go build the second golf course right now.
Well, if we wanted to live within the
boundaries
of what was actually done, which is, you know, it was to maximize the number of lots on the golf course. So the lots were which is a different business model than we're pursuing. And so what we want to do is make it better. And so as a result, we're going back to the county to get an amendment to the specific plan, which is sort of the custom tailored zoning, if you will, for Rams Hill. So we're asking for that amendment as a part of that would allow and facilitate us to do. That's usually just move these uses that are approved, no more than is approved, around on land that we own. Obviously subject to all environmental reviews and making sure that's right first.
Environmental reviews, that was the question that occurred to me. Have you got your CEQA approval?
We don't have our quote CEQA approval, but what we've done is conduct all the technical studies. So subsequent to receiving the unanimous vote of the Board of Supervisors for our threshold decision, we went back and the county gave us a scoping letter of things to be doing. And so we spent quite a bit of money and time in studies, employing environmental scientists who have crawled all over the property, both from a number of disciplines, be it biological, be it cultural resource studies, and have studied the Rams Hill development in great detail. And so ultimately those studies get carried forward into the county, and it's a part of their review process that they will make their conclusions.
And, Diane, there was a full EIR done on the property in 1980, and so there will just be an amendment or supplement. The county will make that determination as part of our process.
So first, the supervisors will or won't give a next step, still fairly preliminary approval? And
No.
then more CEQA?
The staff will review our full application and help us determine what the right next step is with CEQA. And then it goes to the Board of Supervisors. Our counsel, Brooke, is here. Brooke, do I have that process right?
Yep, that's a good summary. So we already went to the County Board of Supervisors for what's called our threshold decision, and they authorized us to submit our application. So that was the preliminary first step, and now we're in the technical review, and we'll be going back to the county with that information.
Are those EIR studies public? They're usually public at some point, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the old studies are public today. The new studies are in process today, but will be public, absolutely.
Okay, so
There's
not online yet.
There's no
They'll
closed
be in our
door.
application to the county.
Okay.
Doesn't seem like directors have any other questions, so if anyone in the public would like to ask a question, now's your time. If you could say your name, that way, because we record it in the minutes, so we just get it recorded
Before
properly.
you go there are some comments in the chat. There are 2 questions and one person, Rebecca Falk, that's asked to speak and ask questions.
Absolutely, so we'll have a in-person public and remote folks
Okay.
ask questions. I'm gonna start with in-person, but we will certainly get to all you remote folks, Rebecca and anybody else. So let me just see, is there anybody in the room who wants to ask a question? Yes.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Dana, and I have 2 homes here in Borrego Springs.
So Elizabeth, could you stand up, just because I want the remote people to be able to hear.
Sure.
Thank you.
I have a question. How would I find out more about what your plans are with the resort?
With respect to Borrego Springs Resort?
Yes.
Yeah, currently, as soon as we're in a position to close and speak as if we are an owner and not a contract purchaser, we will actually come forward with that discussion. I want to make sure that the community is well aware of the construction activities that have to take place there in order to cure the violation that's going to happen. I want to make sure everyone knows and is aware of that.
And how do I find out more about what those violations
are? They're public information through the county. If I'll give you my card and I'll give you what public information I have about that, if I have to.
I can give you kind of a head start. The original developer, the Cameron brothers, graded illegally without permits, and they did not properly construct flood control. So I think that the flood control is the big issue, not so much the illegal grading without a permit. But that was done in the 80s as well. But that's the big issue, is the flood control.
I wonder if that's why I can't get flood insurance in that area.
That's one of the big reasons.
I don't think it has to do with those, improvement areas, original map. It is, they did illegal grading in a floodplain, so it's like doing illegal grading in the wrong place. If it was ever the right place, there's none, but it did it in very much the wrong place, there. Yeah. You bet.
Anyone else in the room? So Jessica, could you help me with the?
Yeah, Rebecca was first.
Okay. Rebecca.
Hi, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to make a couple of comments first. I want to make a comment on the idea that the new development plan does not increase water use beyond what the county originally approved, by reminding people that the original approval was over 40 years ago, and our water situation is known to be different now, and there are agreements and laws that apply now that didn't apply then. And so water is going to be a big issue about greening up a second golf course. And the addendum to the scoping response that the county has given Rams Hill on its pre-approval application or meeting recently was written by Jim Bennett, who is the County Water Resources Manager and sits on our Water Master Board as one of 5 members of that board. BWD has another member on that board. And and he's the one that required the studies being done that Shannon referred to, I believe. And we're all going to be watching that very closely, I hope, because that's going to be a critical thing at this point in time. Even if you have purchased water credits, the question is this going to affect is this water use going to be have an impact on other water uses and on the basin? So that will be a really closely looked at. The other thing, let's see what I've got here. I'm glad Shannon spoke about the destination golf course concept, because I was going to ask about him to speak about that, but he already had. So thank you. And I do want to, I don't know if I said it, but I appreciated this presentation by Shannon and et al. And thank you for doing it. So I had 2 questions. The one of Shannon I don't have because he already spoke to it. Oh, I'm sorry, I had one more comment. On the 2020 threshold decision that Shannon referred to that came before the sponsor group and that the previous Board of Supervisors passed. We have a new slate, not completely, but several new members of the Board of Supervisors. This is a board with the different priorities, so it's unclear how they'll vote, although Nathan Fletcher's seat is up in the air and being voted on, I think, right now or imminently. So what that was an unusual move that Rams Hill did, and it put them in a position to negotiate with county lawyers, their lawyers with county lawyers, on what certain agreements about putting forward a permit application when the time comes. So there are certain things that the county was bound to by that, but approving the permit was not one of them. So as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, it's a very complicated agreement. So I just wanted to make that point, that there was no agreement on a permit that was approved at that time. It was a lawyer's agreement with some specifics about applying for a permit, should that happen. And again, that was under a different constellation of the Board of Supervisors than now exists. So that was my comment. And my question is primarily to be.
Can I respond to that one piece there?
Sure, as long as I can, I just want to reserve my right to ask a question of BWD at the end. Go ahead.
I was just going to mention that it wasn't our idea to come up with this threshold decision. It is the required process of San Diego County. They're the ones that told us this is the way you have to do it. They didn't say you can go left or right. They said this is the way you do it. And so.
Okay, well, you know, the reason I said that, and I really don't know the answer, or I don't know definitively one way or the other, but whenever I, as chair of the Borrego Springs Community Sponsor Group, whenever I inquired of the county about this massive document that got sent to us, I was told that they didn't know much about it either. It was an extremely unusual thing they weren't used to dealing with. So I assumed it was put forward by Rams Hill. I never was told the county required it because they weren't used to seeing it, but honestly, I don't know the answer. So there, I'll just leave it
The answer
there.
I can give is that's the only way that you can do a development agreement, and I think we can all agree that Borrego is very special, and things happen in a Borrego time, and in order for us to make the investment that support the job you see in this room, we have to have certainty that we'll be able to move forward under the same set of rules over time. And so,
Okay,
that's the
okay,
reason why, because that's not something the county normally does, because most developments don't happen in a town with a track record of a maximum of 20 building permits a year. And so this takes a longer period of time, and as a result of that, in order to get a development agreement, which is what we asked for, the county said, this is how you get a development agreement in San Diego County, this is what our ordinance prescribes, and this is the process you go through to get a threshold.
okay. Okay, so that's probably where our comments intersect, that Rams Hill requested a development agreement in advance, which was an unusual thing. So let's just leave it there. And my question of BWD is, it's unclear to me and perhaps to you where this water that Rams Hill is potentially requesting would come from in terms of where in the valley. And options include wheeling or transporting the water from the north or pulling it from the middle section of the aquifer that most of us residents and businesses get our water from. My concern is about water quality in either case, and have you looked into potential impacts on water quality? On the one hand, if water is coming from the north and it goes through BWD infrastructure, and that water has been impacted by agricultural use, how that will affect the rest of us. And B, if it's pulled from the middle section of the aquifer, because the southern end where Rams Hill is doesn't have that water available, then that could potentially impact how we receive water, either impacting wells or potentially even drawing water from lower levels that could impact water quality. So my big question is about water quality impacts. So that's a question that goes to BWD.
Can I answer part of that?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Rebecca, with regard to wheeling, there is a series of statutes that actually govern wheeling, and the BWD is not obligated to wheel water of lesser quality than the BWD's own water.
What's wheeling?
Wheeling is where someone else's water gets transferred through BWD's own infrastructure. So there is a statute that allows, if there's capacity for water to be moved through the BWD system.
Well, right now? Oh.
So if you're not speaking, if you could mute, we'd appreciate it.
Caller 6, please mute.
So the concern about water quality coming out of the northern management area, that water would have to meet or exceed BWD standards to be wheeled through its infrastructure.
If I can add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was gonna ask Dave, and there's another player of this regarding water quality and where water comes from, which is the water master.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
So the water, my understanding is the water master board would make the decision on whether water could be pumped from the north or central management area into a different management area. That's not the function of BWD.
Through a separate pipeline.
Right.
But if we're talking about wheeling water into the BWD system, that water must be as good or better than the water being pumped by the BWD. So it's not like we're going to put non-potable water through the BWD system, or we're not going to put water that doesn't meet the same requirements.
And let me just say, from a T2 perspective, I share Becky's concerns. Water quality, ultimately, at the end of the day, if the lots that we want to build at Rams Hill and the homes we want to build at Rams Hill are ever going to be worth anything, people are going to buy them, water quality's got to be good. So the answer is we're not at odds with one another here by any stretch of imagination. We share the same identical concerns that we want the water district to have high quality water, be financially stable and sound, to serve all customers in Borrego, including those that are at Rams Hill in their service area. So
Great. And could somebody address my worries about the central management area?
That determination would need to be made by the water master.
Well, I'm assuming that BWD cares a lot about the answer to that question and would be looking into it on its own. Am I wrong about that?
That is a function of the water master. And,
I get that. I get that it's a function of the water master, but
the cost of that analysis be borne by the water master and not the BWD. But that analysis would be made.
okay, so BWD's role would be in advocating for what it felt was needed.
Yes.
But if theoretically, maybe Steve Anderson, our lawyer, can chime in, if theoretically the water master were to say, here's permission to someone, to T2, I guess, to move water from the CMA, and BWD said, no, that water isn't high enough quality, we can say no. From what I understand, from what you've said, we can say we are not required to wheel water of lower quality.
Right.
Right. I guess where the iffy stuff comes in is what if taking water from the central management area, which is basically like the middle slice of Borrego of the valley, what if it were to affect water levels so that BWD had to build new wells, for example, which would be our cost and our ratepayers' cost. Steve, do you want to correct me or add anything?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts there, Director Johnson. So maybe we should step back just a little bit. So number one, there is a state law that allows certain volumes of capacity in a public agency water system to be accessed and used by other parties, or what we call bona fide purchasers or bona fide transferors, provided a bunch of constraints are met, including payment for that, but most importantly, that the water quality cannot be any less. So your system does not have to accept, as I think Director Duncan described, non-potable water into your potable water system. And that's a function not only of the water code, what we call the wheeling statutes, but also the Division of Drinking Water, right? So you're a public water agency, you have to comply with the state water board's requirements for water quality, and those are overseen within the department or the division of the state called the Division of Drinking Water, right? And so those inspectors are out and about all the time, so we can't introduce non-potable water into our system as a function of protecting the water quality for existing ratepayers. So that's number one. Number two is, and I don't have it right here in front of me, but in I think it's called the scoping letter that the county sent to T2, my recollection is that and someone said maybe it came from Jim Bennett, I don't know if that's the case or not, but there were some requirements to do some studies, and I think related to groundwater, and I haven't seen the outcome of those studies, but I think if I remember correctly, and T2 folks can correct me, I think part of that study is, are we T2 to support our development going to move water from one management area to another? So I think the county is, and I might be wrong in that, but I think I remember reading that the county's looking at that. And then the third piece of the puzzle, and there's probably others, is that under the judgment, the water master can restrict the movement of water between the management areas. To date, they have not exercised that authority. Maybe that question hasn't been put to them yet, but there has been no constraint. So as of today, you can move water, at least under the judgment, around between management areas as you see fit, but at any time, the water master could restrict that. They have the authority to say, oh no, we can't move water between this management area and that management area because it might, cause problems either from a groundwater level perspective or a water quality perspective. So you have all those different sort of constraints that you have to look at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, what doesn't make sense to Shannon yet is this idea of non-potable water, meaning water that doesn't meet drinking water standards, being put in the same pipe with drinking water. Who said that? We haven't.
We don't want that.
We don't want that. That's not consistent with anything that we've ever thought about, talked about. We would be shooting ourselves in the foot. Our land would be worth nothing because it wouldn't have clean water to service the residents that live there. So as a result, I just want to make sure that we've gone down an odd path here. I just want to be crystal clear that would be against our interest to do anything that degraded water supply. It would just be against our economic interest to do so. And we have no interest in that, nor are we ever oppose that. So hopefully that, and living back to one of other things that Becky said in terms of water itself, just as a reminder, we're not talking about using anything but water that we have the rights to. We're not talking about using seawater. We're not talking about using anybody else's water. I'll remind you that when we came in 2014, we went out and fallowed 800 acre-feet of citrus farms and other farming activities, and took that 800 acre-feet of water and employed about 3 people, and now we employ 93 of the same water. And so, the answer here is that we're only going to do it with water that is water that we own as a part of this process. So I just don't think there would be confusion at the board or in the public's eye that somehow T2 is taking water that belongs to somebody else, because that won't happen. Just simply won't happen.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Becky.
Could I just make a quick response to that, Dave? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes,
DWD.
Becky, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I never questioned that you haven't purchased enough water to own a ton of water here in Borrego. My question was whether other factors would play in that would make it an unsafe use, even if you do own the water. And I'm not saying I know the answer to that. I've just raised some questions. Thanks, Shannon.
Very good. Yep. I applaud the skepticism and making sure that we do it right. We only got one time to get it right.
And my comment and others, I think, about moving water through the pipes is that, so when we talk about water rights, that's very theoretical, but it comes down to specific wells that put water into pipes of specific diameters. And does the pipe that goes up to Rams Hill, for example, have the capacity to pump a whole bunch more water through it? That's one of those technical issues that will be looked at hard over the next year or two.
Absolutely. We got to have smart people help us with that question, because that's not a math problem that I can solve. What I do know is historically there's been a whole bunch of water that's moved in that direction, and you can look back into the old records and see how big it was. I mentioned before Trey Driscoll's report back on water golf course usage in 2014, cited the peak at 1,750. It was all in that same improvement district, 1,750 acre-feet of water in that particular year, which would have probably been equivalent to all of BWD's production at that year, somewhere in that range.
That would have been taken from some of your own wells up there, wouldn't it?
I know we didn't own any wells at the time that day was created. This was preceding that time period. This would have been 1,750 was probably in the 06, 07 time frame, something like that.
But to your point, Diane, experts will be hired, hydrology and water supply experts will be hired to do the analysis, exactly what you're talking about. T2 will hire experts, they will do it. They will give that result to us. It gets to fire flows and all sorts of things, number of tanks, where are the tanks put, and those analysis has been reviewed by the district engineer, and we have an opportunity for discussion if we disagree with the math about how much water can move through the pipe. So that is a requirement on T2 to do that analysis, and a requirement on Borrego Water District to review it and make sure we're comfortable. And we come to a an agreement on what's possible before another pipe has to be built, or a bigger pipe has to be put in there. At which point, if that happens, T2 would have to pay for it, because it's a need for the new development, and so Borrego Water District and ratepayers, if the second pipe had to be built, T2 would have to bear the cost. Because we need the analysis first to even know, which is what your point is, we need the analysis first, which T2 is doing.
I'm wondering if for members of the public here, if it would be worthwhile, maybe Jeff, giving just a quick précis of the effects on BWD. We've been talking about your plans, but we have to do a whole lot of fancy footwork between now and then, between now and whatever development is done, after all of these studies, figuring out not just drinking water pipes, but also capacity of the sewer plants, and also like whole other regulations we've mentioned recently, like fire, having enough flow through pipes for.
Yeah, Diane, but that's our job.
Right.
That's the water district's job.
I know.
And the good news is, to the extent that we have to hire consultants to do that work, T2 will bear the cost.
Right, but I'm just asking for some possible background for, we have a lot of new people here who might be interested in hearing why BWD seems to be fretting about some details, because they're because it is our job.
Well,
we haven't talked about that.
Yeah, I don't think of them as details. I think of them as very important things. And so, and it will be addressed by those that are experts that can do it. We're not going to solve that in the room today, I don't think. And so I think getting another meeting together at a time when we have that data ready to expose for everybody, and you have reviewed it, I think it'd be great to have another session to cover that, because, you know, again, it's against our interest not to have the infrastructure in place to serve what's at the top of the hill where all these people work. I feel a great sense of obligation to do right by them and do right by Borrego. And so we want to make sure we get it right. We're not at odds.
We can put that in the agenda. Once we have the studies, I think that's a good idea. And then it's properly agendized, and we can talk about it, and,
Right.
Yeah. Are there other questions, remote questions? Yes, Jessica.
Oh, yeah.
Who's next?
So the next question came from Susanna. She says, thank you. This seems to be more towards T2. Thank you for the presentation. Please describe the attainable/workforce housing a bit more. I am happy to see that. The audio, I guess, was a little garbled. The microphone is on that little table in front of Tammy. Is the workforce housing guaranteed? Will it be built before, after, concurrently? Will it really be affordable to the workforce? Is the first part of her question, and then she is asking for a description on the impact of the current open space.
That's a lot.
And I don't know if you can.
Suzanne? Was it Suzanne? Susan. Okay. Susanna. Great. Thank you. Sorry, I want to make sure I got that right. Number one is that we have a need to build the housing yesterday. The easiest thing that I can give you is discrete examples is, one, as Rodney briefed, we have plans that we have up over here, the schematics of, and we have other plans that are in process to submit for a building permit where we're going to build our prototype in the Deepwell neighborhood. So we bought a specific lot there to do our prototype for that home, and I got a feeling that we'll get lots of visitors when that happens. And so that is a very near-term issue. We bought a lot. We're in the middle of getting the designs resolved so that we can actually file for the permit and build. We all know in Borrego that there's not, last time I checked, there were 2 houses for rent in Borrego, and they were all over $1,900, $1,700, $1,900, something like that. $2,000 a month. And so that's not really what I would call attainable workforce housing and a sufficient supply. And so what we know is that today, if Willie could hire 4 more people, he would, because they're in the budget. Those positions are in the budget. Harry made me do it. It's in the budget, and we'd love to have more. But where are they going to live? And so the greatest thing that I can tell you, Susanna, is to say that we have a need to do so for our own, and that's going to be a part of our process. We hope, as I mentioned earlier, to have some additional lot supply at Borrego Springs Resort at a cost level that will allow us to get the cost down low. And that's one of the reasons why those 84 lots are particularly attractive. If in fact that can work, is their cost basis will be low and allow us to do this. In terms of when are we going to do it? Follow our actions, don't follow our lips. See what we do, because that's going to be the clearest thing for you to do. But it will be an off-site exercise where we vision the workforce housing being closer to, I'm going to say town, in a way, because that's closer to schools, it's closer to groceries, closer to church, all those activities, and that's where it would be more likely located as opposed to the far south end of town.
And, yeah, Susanna, I'll speak to the part of your question about open space, which is on the eastern side of our property, where there is land that has no special habitat, no special artifacts, but was labeled as open space by the prior developer. That is where we want to put some desert-centric housing, and Shannon is pointing us to that here on our site plan map. So this is, up here is the golf course we know today. The gray areas are the Rams Hill neighborhoods you're familiar with if you're driving through the community. And then down here is where we would like to build these non-golf desert estates that I was talking about earlier. And because of that, we will base some of our open space easement, and we'll need to replace that open space. And some of that replacement will be on site in other areas, but some of it will need to be off of our property. And so we heard loud and clear from the Board of Supervisors, from the Planning Commission, and from the Community Sponsor Group that helping the park is a priority. And so that feels good to us, and we want to do that. We've been in discussions with the Borrego Foundation and with the current park superintendent about what are their land priorities to try to help so that we can get some of our off-site open space, perhaps in a park in-holding or near an important trailhead or some of these small lots in town, depending on their priorities and what makes sense financially. There's a concern we don't want to raise the price of those parcels, and so there's a bit of a tension there that we're aiming to balance.
Good question.
Pico Rude asks if there's a map of the 2 square miles or 1,280 acres of currently open space that is going to be developed. Is there a map?
The easiest map I can show you is one
Same
behind
map.
here, the same map that Kathy pointed to. And when we make our application, this will be in. It's also the same general map that was a part of the community sponsor group meeting back in, whenever that was, 2020 or earlier.
2019, yeah.
2019. It's the same. So, I'm easy to find. Shannon at ramshill.com. Reach out to me, and I'll be glad to get you what information you need.
And from Jim Dax, why are you proposing year-round, I think it's supposed to be year-round golf? Won't that require significant more water? Is the new grass being installed because of the changing water quality from extensive pumping?
Great question. Number one is, in Borrego, in order to have a golf course, you water it all year. And so in terms of the watering that's done, this doesn't create incremental water. As I said before, industry studies show that conversion from our prior grass types to the micro Bermudas that we're installing right now, we can expect to reduce water usage by about 25%. And so it's going to use less water, not more. In terms of water quality, the answer here is that the water at Rams Hill, as in Borrego generally, is salty-ish, if you will. And so the answer of matching our grass types to what Mother Nature provides seems like a smart idea. Actually doing what had been done in the past really is probably not a smart idea. Trying to grow cool season grasses in the desert is a difficult one. And so the reaction was to get ourselves to where we would have the longest season possible. Does anybody in here like October in Borrego? Anybody?
Well, it's better than July.
Better than July, okay. I mean, that's when we have Borrego days, hopefully. And the answer is October is pretty nice, but you probably don't recognize that October, we're closed every year. We were closed because of the grass type that we used. And by making this change in grass type, we're going to be able to be open in October. Actually, we'll be open in September and other months that will, again, help for sustainability and enhance hospitality business for us here in Borrego. Jim, if that didn't answer it, just shoot me an email.
And And the next is from Dan Jealous, a similar question about map of location of the new areas and the offset. So I don't know, we're gonna put the slides Kathy provided on our website today. I don't know if you could email Esmeralda a map to put up with that?
Well,
Or if you'd rather they reach out to you?
yeah, I mean, the other thing I would remind, the community and everybody of is we still have to go through the county land use approval process. And so this is, in some ways, it's a work in progress, and we will have to do a submittal to the county, which will go before the community sponsor group and the planning commission and then the board of supervisors. And so we wanted to provide this information today, but we will be speaking about this and more of the land planning details with the community.
Very true, and I think the answer is it's shifted and changed, and I would believe that there'll be changes between now and then. So, again, to emphasize what Kathy said, this is not the last time this community is going to be looking at this map.
More of a comment from our Reed. There are buildable lots already at Rams Hill. They want to file the open space reserve. There hasn't been a new home for 20 years. So obviously this is for timeshares rather than homes, as the comment doesn't seem to be a question. Want to address it or?
Yeah, Randy, we've had this conversation before a bit here. Just to help everybody understand, there are a lot of lots that are built at Rams Hill that don't have a house on it yet. But the road's there, the water's there, the sewer's there, the electric's there, everything is there, and those lots are ready to go. And I want to say that number's in the 500 range. I can't remember, the numbers are jumbled in my head.
500 map lots.
500 map lots. So there's a lot more lots that physically exist today, and that's what Randy was talking about. And so one of the questions has been, well, why would you build something different and new out in a different location as opposed to building on where the lots are? Well, the answer is, as Kathy told us before, it's living in a golf-centric environment. There's some people that don't want to live in a golf-centric environment. Randy lives in a golf-centric environment. There are other people who would prefer to live in a desert-centric environment. And I think it's in your slide deck. We had some pictures. But the answer of, they're two different products, and they may in fact be two different customers. And so like most things in business, the customer's going to decide. But what I would say, generally speaking, is that because the infrastructure is already in place in certain areas in Ramsville today, that economically speaking, it's going to make likely more sense to build on some of those lots sooner as opposed to later there. And so we don't have any in our business plan that involves timeshares or any of those uses currently in any of our plans. Next question.
Well, and just to say it, if we develop in the current neighborhood, we have to comply with the current neighborhood HOA restrictions and architectural requirements, and so all of that would remain consistent.
Yep, didn't change.
Similar comment from David, finish the existing buildable lots, then build out the existing undeveloped golf course. Only then should T2 be allowed to expand.
Yep. Well, thanks, David, for the advice, and I would say that we're going to pursue things that we believe are best for our teammates and best for the sustainability of Rams Hill. And as a result, we're going to be the ones making those decisions, certainly bounded by what the county permits and allows us to do.
Jim Dax gave a thank you, hoping we can meet again in the fall with a larger audience to discuss the concerns of the public.
And we do have a big audience in the room. I don't know if you can see it on the online video, but there's, I don't know, this is the folks that's seen BWD a long time, huh? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Will there be an HOA at the resort because there is presently?
Well, we're not the declarant we would not be the declarant at Borrego Springs Resort. The existing developer is not the capital D developer in that case either, as I understand it. And so formation of an HOA would be up to the homes that are there. And if we get in and develop a workforce housing neighborhood in that location, I haven't really come to that decision yet. Whether we're going to quote an HOA or not. What are you looking for an HOA to do?
Oh, she was just saying that you were going to comply with any HOA.
Every hill.
That there isn't any extra.
There Rams Hill, in the Rams Hill community, but not at Borrego.
Jeanette Huntley, do the plans to build affordable housing in the BSR area potentially include the previous golf course area or only the previously planned lots?
Currently, it's just the previously planned lots, because those are finally mapped lots with the county, so they're eligible, if you will, to pick up a building permit today and build on them. There's not some other set of infrastructure that has to be installed. That's also something that allows us to keep costs as low as possible to make sure that the housing that's created is at the right price point.
Shannon, I did just want to clarify for everybody in the room and on the record that the BSR development isn't part of this project, so that it could potentially happen. These are potential future plans. We don't currently own it. It's not part of this project, so I just want to make that clear.
Yeah. Thank you, Brooke. When we're talking with neighbors, we kind of blur the lines on everything because we want everybody to hear and be heard.
Comment from David, more jobs is not a sufficient reason to deplete our water, especially when unemployment rates are at a 50-year low.
Great, and I agree, we're not going to be depleting your water. The only water that's being used is the water rights that we have acquired over time that we will tender quite a few of to the Borrego Water District, hopefully, in providing service to the homes and the new homeowners in Borrego.
And finally, there was just a thank you from Susanna for answering the workforce and open space questions. And that is all that we have so far from online.
Anybody in the room have any more questions? Directors? Do we?
Can I have a very short close?
Absolutely, Shannon.
I just want
Shannon, would you please close?
Yeah, this is a bit short. I know.
All right, so
Dave's
we're
gonna give me the hook.
going.
I want to say thank you to the directors for taking the time to be here today, to listen, to hear, and question. And hopefully, as we've said now publicly, what we said privately is that we don't see a way that Ramsdale can be successful without a healthy BWD. We think we are, and any assertion to the contrary is got to be miscommunication. And because we really believe that we have a chance here to do something that would be good, not only for Rams Hill, but for Borrego generally, and as well for the Borrego Water District, as it faces a limited number of customers per mile of infrastructure, and all of those things that y'all have done a good job of reining in and getting your arms around over the last years. And our side of the equation here, we as T2 feel a great and heavy responsibility for what we do for Borrego and what we do for these people right here. And so we just want to tell you to work hard, help us get there, and know that we're going to do the right thing together in the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Shannon, Rodney, Kathy, and the folks from Rams Hill, particularly ones that had a chance to speak. I really appreciate you going to be being here. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, so I know there's several of you that I know you really want to know about the capitalization plan of the Borrego Water District. We're going to take a 5-minute break, so if people want to leave, you can get up and go. Anybody who wants to stay in our open meeting, you are more than welcome. So it's 10:43, 5 minutes, we will just resume.
Please take advantage of the refreshments.
Please take your refreshments.
Harry, when do I get to come teach again? Soon. All right, you know my number. Good. These are easy.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say super long hiking poles.
Did y'all survive in the summer?
So far, so good. We prayed to the gods of electricity.
And the BMA is still hanging in there, okay?
Now, thinking about giving coupons to the market for school supplies.
Just like David, you know my number if you need anything. We always try to help. We'll be coming around again this year, and one of my favorite things to do is the gift cards.
Yeah.
That is of all the things that I do, that and giving our students, and their parents, their scholarship, those bring me great joy. Those are something. We'll open it again, it's love. For the hotter and the more humid it is, every year it's still now. I've been praying that the clouds and the humidity low in order but I want to we went to the Borrego out of the Walmart. Hey, we're thinking about the little piece of grass that's worth $150. And maybe we have. So the number one rule of farming is you're planting the crop to your environment. That's what we're trying to do. I missed the restaurant, that's why I asked. It's right now, planning the vision. That's the right part.
I noticed that I was wearing a big black outfit. I didn't notice. You said we were gonna take them this morning. No, I remember standing there with the sun in my face.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, you don't have so many careers.
I know.
Thanks, Rodney. Glad you found.
Thank you. I don't think we've formally met, but yes.
We talked briefly at the open house.
Yes.
We were still looking for a place.
Yeah, and we found a place over here now.
I thought they'd like to buy it.
Right now, but eventually we will.
You have a relationship established with the realtors?
Yeah, I do. I've been talking to, there's one or two of them I've been talking to, so.
Good luck.
Out of here, you guys continue the meeting?
You're welcome to stay.
Thank you.
What happened? They carried that out.
We haven't concluded item 2A,
Woo-wee.
so we can now move on to item 2B, the capitalization policy. And will you do that, Jeff, or will
Yeah,
Jessica?
Jessica is teed up and ready to discuss this. Now, basically, capitalization is, once assets are constructed, we need to basically accept the asset and quote unquote capitalize it. So I guess Jessica will explain, we did not have a specific policy in the past, or we did, and we're updating it. So anyway, I will let her explain what's going on, but this is all really fun, exciting accounting details. Jessica, go.
All righty. So there's this, regulatory, I guess more of a guidance body called the, Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And their rule number.
GASB, that's a big
Yeah.
word. Yes.
And their statement number 87, which came out a few years ago, recommended that government entities capitalize leased assets. Now, the only assets that we lease are a postage machine and our Xerox copier. So basically, this rule would mean that whenever we start a new lease, we have to, basically capitalize the value of all lease payments that we're gonna pay over the life of that item, and then do depreciation on it every year, which, you know, essentially the depreciation would match our lease payments and be an expense, so at the end of the day, it's all a wash. It does require a few additional worksheets when we go through the audit process, so that is more billable hours to our auditor. If it were something major, yeah, let's do it, but with these little office equipment, we just wanted to make room in our capitalization policy that we don't have to go through all the, back bins and whatnot. And that was our recommendation from our auditing firm, that we, add this into the policy, which had not been amended since 2008. This hasn't been looked at. So I'm sure we could make a more robust capitalization policy, but for now, we're just kind of worried about the, practical things that we've encountered. Also, all of our assets, we do, depreciate according to the straight line method, meaning you take the number of useful years, divide the value by that, so you're depreciating the same amount every year over the life of the asset, and that was not written in our capitalization policy, so I also added that. This policy was reviewed by the Finance Committee, and I believe have their recommendation to adopt it, and that's it. Any questions?
Can I get to the chase and make a motion that we adopt the recommendation?
I second. Absolutely, and I hear a second. Is there any discussion, questions from the directors?
Public? Do we have anybody remote still?
There are still 13 on there.
Okay, all right, so,
Mostly staff, Jim Deck.
all right.
That's all.
Let me know if the public chimes in. Having had a motion and a second to adopt the capitalization policy with amendment date today. Looking for vote, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays, any abstention, motion passes. All right. Consulting agreement with Dynamic Engineering for BWD District Engineer Services.
Yes, Madam Vice President, one or two meetings ago, the board authorized staff to develop the contract and documents needed to initiate the services of Dynamic Engineering, to serve as district engineer, with the departure of Mr. Dale. And so legal counsel put together the draft agreement, and that's in the packet. After the packet was released, Tammy and Steve and I started a little email chain about kind of some of the termination provisions. And so what I'd like to do is have Steve run through the document first, let us know if there's anything kind of unique or cool about it, kind of our standard consulting agreement. And then we'd like to talk about the termination provisions. And basically, my desire would be to make sure that we're covered in the scenario that they want to leave us. Just based on what I found, trying to hire another district engineer, it's challenging, and I really could not find an employee. I mean, this was a good alternative, using the consulting engineer, so we're proceeding with that. But, let's just say Dynamic, for whatever reason, a year from now, whoever wants to serve us, whether their business is going great or going the opposite direction, let's just say theoretically they don't want to work for us a year from now. I just want to make sure that we have enough time today to find somebody and be transitioned, the new district engineer. So, Steve, when we get to that part of the agreement, the termination provisions, you might want to kind of play with those dates a little bit. I was kind of kicking around that it'd be nice to have kind of 90 days to find somebody and 30 days to transition. That still might not be enough. We might have to find another consulting engineer if there is no quote unquote employee that would be interested in the position. I just want to make sure that we have time. And I think Tammy's initial concern was, I think the way the contract was written, they couldn't get out, right? Isn't that part of it? Yeah. So, Steve, why don't you go ahead and run us through the agreement, and then when you get to the termination part, maybe we'll take a little pause there and let the board chime in on what an appropriate term might be, with the background of kind of what my goal would be to give us time to find somebody in the quote unquote train/transition that we first.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. So this is what I would call a very bare bones agreement. Um, so easy 3-pager. Just describes on page 1, if you go to the next slide there on the screen, who the parties are, and you're hiring dynamic consulting engineers. So you're not hiring an individual, you're hiring a engineering consulting firm. Describes what their professional services are, and highlights on 3A. A lot of times when we do these consulting agreements, we'll have a scope of services attached. In this case, you kind of want Dynamic to do everything. I think all the engineering services for the district, so it's hard to describe, but to the extent that Jeff is going to issue task orders or otherwise give work to Dynamic, it should be in writing. So send an email, Jeff. Don't just call him, is all we're saying here. If we want to develop something in writing in the future, we can do that. But again, it's kind of hard to do it on the front end in this case because there's no limited scope of work. The term is an unlimited term. The compensation is set forward in the attachment, which we'll show you. We're requiring $2 million worth of insurance. Next page, section 3EI on the next page relates to the termination. If you could advance the slide. And as originally written in section 3EI, we said that the consulting firm can only terminate with BWD's concurrence. Tammy and Jeff pointed out, of course, that even though that would be more palatable for our Borrego because it's hard to find people to fill this position, in some sense, that's kind of maybe too much to swallow for a firm that should be allowed to terminate services. So I think, Jeff, on an email to me, you were toying with maybe we should consider a 90 or 120-day advance notice termination provision that the consultant could exercise anytime they want. The rest of the stuff in the agreement is kind of boilerplate. There is an attorney's fees provision and indemnification. And of course, if this agreement is changed, you need to do it by way of amendment. Then they tell us that they're authorized to sign this agreement, and then their rate sheet is on page 13 of the board packet if the board wants to see that. And that's all there is to it. But in terms of the termination provision, we can certainly change it if the board so requests to 90 days, 120 days, or any other number of days you decide upon. So we'll happily make whatever change the board directs us to make. But there's no need. If the board wants us to make a change, you can still approve the agreement today. We'll just make the change subject. Well, you can approve the agreement subject to whatever change you direct. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
In terms of that termination provision, I think using the words up to 90 days with a period satisfactory from my perspective. If we find the golden unicorn employee out there and it doesn't take that long, great. I think up to 90 days plus a 30-day transition period. Maybe that's just described as 120 days, because then we don't have to worry about, oh, you're on day 89 and 92 or whatever. So it might be best just to put in 120 days, but that would be my up to 120. Would just make me feel a little more comfortable. Even we need to find somebody that it would give us adequate time to see if that person does exist, and if not, potentially another consulting engineer for it, whatever the case may be.
Hey, Jeff, is it okay if I would suggest if we're going to do 120 days, we say 120 days unless the parties jointly agree to terminate earlier than that. And that way, if you hire somebody within 2 months, you can let them go earlier, but it has to be upon joint agreement.
Question. This is for our district engineer as opposed to like, replacing the water line over in Sun Gold. We're gonna hire them independently for that. So any construction projects wouldn't necessarily be affected by this termination.
Good point. Yep. This would be district engineer.
Okay. So any capital type projects, we kind of initiate and do a separate contract.
Yep. Great example. They are under contract now to design Isa Padilla project, right? The first one. PSR, the Borrego Springs Resort. I'm sorry, Borrego Springs Road. Switch hats here. Borrego Springs Road, and then they're under a contract for $128,000 to develop the plans and specs and all the design documents to be able to bid that project. Now, Dynamic will also have a role in evaluating T2 information, going back to the 2 hours we spent this morning. So there'll be a separate scope of work for that, separate schedule, separate, because obviously that will obviously also be a T2 reimbursable, or I guess a BWD reimbursable from T2. So even something like T2 would be a separate contract. The T2 evaluation of development-related impacts would be a separate contract.
So we don't have to worry about, like, the only reason I ask, we want to make sure that if we're in the middle of construction or the tank wouldn't stop being built because we don't have an engineer doing oversight.
So we'll make sure when we have those specific scope of works for those construction projects that they have similar requirements.
Any other questions? You're addressing the one concern I brought up.
Thank you.
So
Thanks for bringing that. That was really, really good.
now looking for another motion.
I so move with the revision that we talked about, the 120 days.
Thank you. And what Steve said.
Yeah, exactly.
What was that, Steve? What was your language again? It wasn't up to, it was some 5 other words you used instead of up to.
Me?
Yeah.
It's 120 days unless the parties jointly agree otherwise.
I'll second, Diane seconds.
So we have a motion on the table to approve the contract language with this one change, as described by Steve. Any other questions from the public? Any questions? Jessica says no. So let's vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes. Moving down our list to D, and we have Diana here. Resolution 2023.08.01, declaring BWD property as surplus.
So, what you have in front of you, I'm basically read. So this is, I have brought this to the board's attention, I don't know, maybe about 3 months ago in regards to, a piece of property that, we no longer have need for. So just to kind of recap again, it all began in 2005 when the district purchased a 1-acre piece of parcel from, called the Kafabi family, for the development of Well 4. So that was a 1-acre parcel located on Borrego Springs Road near Borrego Horns Road. And in 2015, Charlie White, he has 170 acres surrounding that area. He donated 22.5 acres of his 170 acres of land to the BWD. Now, this particular donated parcel horseshoes around the 1-acre parcel previously purchased from Cavalli's, and there is a map in here for a visual. So the district fenced a portion of the 22 acres and developed what is now Well 9. So the fenced area is, in the board package, it says 10 acres, approximately 10 acres, but I got word that it is actually 7.7 acres. So the fenced area is 7.7 acres. So Mr. White had contacted the county of San Diego to inquire about building on his 170 acres when he was told that the lot was not a legal lot. Very much of a surprise to him and us. So when the 2015 donation transaction occurred, the paperwork was not completed. So with this discovery, Mr. White contacted the district inquiring about what the next steps to correct this. So in these discussions, the district came to the conclusion that the BWD does not need the entire donated land and is considering redonating a portion of that land back to Mr. White. So the portion of land that's up for consideration, again, it says approximately 10 acres, but it's actually 16 acres from the information I just received over the weekend, and is located directly east of Well 9, which with entry from Borrego Springs Road. That's kind of the recap of what the situation is. The, transaction was not 100% completed. So it puts, Mr. White in a kind of a difficult situation. So in order to fix this, the district would need to, go through an APN split with a boundary adjustment with certificate of completion. But before we could do that, the Borrego Water District is required to go through what's called a Surplus Land Act, which we have to, it requires the district to put a notice of availability to designated entities, allow for a 60-day period for these entities, which include like the potential affordable housing developers that might have an interest in this land. So we have to go through the Surplus Land Act before we can move forward. So today we're asking if the board is okay with that portion of land of that surplus land, and if so, then that sets the motion for us to go through that process. And yeah, that's about what sums it up. So again, we would have to go through an APN split. We'd have to then go through a boundary adjustment, certificate of compliance, and hopefully that will take care of the situation.
Madam Vice President, there's a economic impact. It's what, a couple $1,000, right?
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
typically, when the most recent request was made to give back some of the property, that was really just purely to help Mr. White. Mr. White wants to have access to the remaining 170 acres, has some really cool plans about maybe some really nice equestrian-related developments and houses out there. So this was all generated by him, this latest idea. And normally I would say, then that's up to you. You pay for it. You pay for any costs associated with what you want us to do. What kind of tripped me up a little bit was the original donation, and all the paperwork wasn't done right when Mr. White donated property, and we used it. You know, if we hadn't built well 4-9 on there, and it was just another piece of property collecting dust out there, that'd be one thing. But you know, we used it. The well's there. It's running. It's functional. It provides a lot of security for us going forward. So I kind of see the $2,000 as completing that initial transaction, our share of completing that initial transaction. So, you know, we're also coming back to say, is it okay also if we spend a couple $1,000? I think Dan estimated the fiscal impact in your staff report, but there's also some economic impact just because the first deal wasn't done right. All the paperwork wasn't done. We're kind of fixing that previous problem to allow him and us to continue with what he wants to do now, which is the swap and APN creations and the like. So, normally I say it, and we did in the beginning, sorry, Mr. White, this is all yours, but then when we dug deeper and found out we're fixing past problems, and like I said, we did really use that property. We put a $2 million well on it, fenced in 7 acres. It's going to be a big piece of our operation for the next 40 years. So that's why there's a little bit of a cost associated with it.
I'm okay with that. Yeah. I'm just curious, though, this kind of cost, can this come out of our ratepayer income?
Yes, this is all cost of operations, part of doing business. Good. Land acquisition of the lands.
And we're doing this public auction. If someone comes forward, we have to sell it to them?
No, I think we do. Steve, if somebody does say, hey, and they respond to our notice of availability or whatever it's called, you know, what happens from there? If the California Housing Authority or somebody says, yeah, that sounds like a great condo project.
Yeah, you just have to negotiate with them and see if you can come to a price. I will say though, and Diana and everybody else knows more about this than me, but the district has done this 3 or 4 times, this surplus property procedure. in the last couple of years because you had some other properties, and I don't think you ever got a response to any of these notices. Am I remembering that right, Jeff and Diana?
Right, yep, and we had big pieces, like the Wilcox, 120 acres, and, smaller, the Makatio Wells property that we declared surplus. Either sold to ABF or are planning to sell to ABF in the next year or so. But yeah, no response from any housing related authorities, no other interest as part of the declaration process.
But we are obligated to sell to them. They get first dibs.
Yeah, they get first dibs. I mean, you got to come to an agreement. But yeah, housing, the governor has prioritized and the legislature prioritized using surplus public agency land to support housing needs. So that doesn't mean we have to build housing, just sell to, one of the state government agencies that does housing stuff. So, yep.
And the blue blob on your map, which I appreciate having the map, thank you.
Yes.
Is the surplus land.
Yes, correct. So there is some access right there off of, I guess that's where, Borrego Road. Little sliver, but it's, cameras, trees, and right in the middle of the lot, so,
And we still have our access.
yes.
I move that we, put this up for surplus, subject to, the language in the resolution.
I'll second.
Can we, continuing questions, can we donate it back? I think I read, we can't donate it back to Mr. White, we have to sell it to him, assuming no surplus buyer comes in. Can we donate it back? I thought I knew.
Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, this is a weird circumstance. And ordinarily, if you had extra property, you'd have to sell it to him for market price, which I imagine is not terribly high. But this is such an odd circumstance given the past transaction that wasn't fully completed that I think the board probably has leeway to do what it wants because this is such an odd duck. But it's up to the board to decide.
And this is written up that we're donating it back? We're not?
I think it says
This is just the first step to put it out the first step.
Yeah, right.
And then
So we're not making the agreement on whether we donate it or charge them?
I think that's after we go through the 60-day process.
Okay. And then the only other question is the access, and that's because, does this plot become part of parcel C? This is page 20, there's a really good picture. It says parcel A, parcel C, parcel C.
I believe that they would make it into parcel C, unless they're gonna make it parcel A, B, C, and D. That would be, I think maybe the surveyors mentioned something like that. I can't really recall what they said, but I would assume it would either become a fourth parcel, or it would become part of parcel C.
I'm thinking there's Diana Meadows statues out there. The farm statues are over.
Other side of the road.
Yeah, we're off
This is the old horse property, the old Kentucky Derby winner was there, and there's actually, you can see the remnants of the racetrack out there.
Right.
I would say, because it's splitting parcel A, so I would assume it has to become its own parcel first, and then if Mr. White ended up with it again, he could
Merge in the C.
Yeah, but I
So
don't.
that's why it needs the easement. If it's its own parcel, then he's looking.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know, Steve could probably answer that question for us, but I think since it's splitting parcel A, it's gotta become its own parcel first.
Does the public have any questions? All right, so we have a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion passes. Moving right along, we have item number 2E, Borrego Springs Sub-Basin Water Master Board Report. Mr. Duncan.
I have nothing new to report. The next water master meeting is September 14th, and we're all invited.
Yeah, and our meeting's 2 days before, so hopefully we'll have a chance to know what's on the agenda and be able to chat.
And meanwhile, the judges' status conference is in between.
Are we gonna talk about the status conference? Or is that later?
What's that?
Is Trey here? Does he have an update?
Ms. Falk is asking, when is the status conference?
The 18th, is that right?
I have to check my calendar, yeah.
Steve,
Yeah, I'm looking right now. Sorry. Yeah.
I think it's
The 18th, I have it
18, yeah, 18.
at 9 AM.
Trey is here.
Hey, Tammy, can you hear me?
I can now.
Terrific. The update I have is that in Terra, we worked with the Watermaster TAC and Watermaster staff on the compilation of the e-logs and well logs for the airborne electromagnetic survey for DWR. We provided a draft map to DWR for the flight lines and the areas of interest, and we submitted that on time to DWR on July 26th. Just for a reminder, the next TAC meeting is on August 29th at 10 a.m. And then, as Dave indicated, we're dark in August for the Watermaster staff. And the next, the board meeting is September 14th at 4:30 p.m. That's all the update I have for today.
Do you happen to remember the agenda for the TAC meeting? On the 29th?
The 29th, we're going to review the results of the updated water use factors with the farm process, with the water year meter data. And then also we are going to begin to discuss the 5-year update for the groundwater management plan. And also Andy will be providing an update on the technical support services monitoring well results to date.
Great. Thank you, Trey.
Absolutely.
All right, that concludes section 2. Moving to section 3, ad hoc committee reports. Are there any ad hoc committee members that have anything to report?
I can say that the financial committee met, and we don't have any recommendations at this point. We have more questions to follow up on. But we made progress in looking at our reserve funds and defining them. So once we have some information, then we'll be able to the board maybe modify our reserve policy. I don't know if we have a policy for reserves.
Yeah, it was reserve policy we talked about. There's a question brewing, Diane?
No, on the report, Miles late on the outreach subcommittee with Kathy gone, she and I are the members, we won't be working on that till September. I did sort of raise the notion with the Stewardship Council, which has a lot of outreach money from Prop 68, that they serve as the sort of blackboard monitors, kind of trying to get groups together to talk about what everyone is doing, and they thought that should be a BWD responsibility.
That's my job, right?
Yeah.
And I've even sent emails out to people saying, hey, let's talk, let's have a call. I got 0 response
I
from
know,
them.
I think we need to be more aggressive about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that's it.
A quick note on the cybersecurity. We're queued up for a free cybersecurity review of our OT operation technology infrastructure, and CISA group is looking to combine travel with some other organization not too far from us, and so we're just happily, quietly waiting till they can pick a date. So that is coming.
Hopefully it's cool weather.
Yeah, I hope they come cool weather too. Yeah, exactly. They took a look at our temperatures. Can't find time. All right, we'll move on to section 5, staff reports. We go back to Ms. Jessica.
Oh, yeah. Let's see, it says here,
AMI. Yes.
So, as you all know, we are working on our AMI, RF, whatever you want to call it.
So we have a large document, with a lot of information for the contractors to fill out. And, I don't know, Jeff and Tammy came up with this brilliant idea to do an abridged version where we only, do kind of a summary interview with people and then invite the ones that we like to do the whole package, because it can be, very time consuming and costly to fill those out. We are almost done with, having the document ready. All that's left is just some technical review, kind of going over our, district-wide specs in regards to meters and customers and meter sizes and meter boxes and all these little details. We were hoping to have one to approve at this meeting, but sadly it will be in September.
For sure. I mean, we're close.
For sure.
Tammy and I are done. Jessica's doing all the hard work to make sure it all makes sense and filling all the tables and details.
And Will and Ellen are going out and verifying the large meters for me, because, I was getting conflicting reports from Springer. So that's always fun.
So the good news is we're making progress. The editor's block was released a month or two ago, so I'm out of my rut. Thanks, everybody.
And then over to you, Jeff.
Yeah, let's talk about fouling, shall we? So basically, what I put in the packet would be, I know we put the David Bauer documents in there, right? Steve helped me put some documents together just to kind of disclose the purchase of the baseline property allocation and water rights from the farmland that we accomplished in the last couple of months with William and David. Steve, can you help me remember what you wanted me to put in the packet? And just maybe run the board through it. I'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah, so in the packet, we have the David Bauer purchase and sale agreement, which is the agreement to acquire the Bauer parcels and undertake fallowing through 2030. So it's a multi-year process, and the first phase of that has closed, but the first parcel that you purchased, along with the first segment of water rights, that part of it is closed in 2023, and then the agreement describes what happens in subsequent years. And I think also Jeff has in the packet some photos related to that fallowing that's going on. And then in addition to that, we have the grant deed showing the finalization, the district's purchase of the William Bauer property and water rights. And that's just two or three pages right before the photos start. So that's in the packet.
Basically, we're just disclosing and notifying the public and releasing these documents. Right? Obviously, the board, we've been talking about this for a while. There's actions happening in closed session. So this is just a public disclosure of what we all have been working on for the past few months. So that's the intent. And then in terms of item B, David Bauer has been very busy and has continued with his fallowing activities. And the Bauers have a cool little setup. They have a little airplane. There's a runway, a landing strip on the David Bauer piece. And they just, for decades, have flown their little airplane between Borrego and Valley Center, is where they live, the Bauer Ranch, big avocado farm over there. So David has been buzzing around his property the last couple of weeks and sent me a few really cool photos. So basically what's in there would be some aerial photos to show kind of the scope of what's no longer being watered. So basically, that entire William Bauer piece, that funny shaped rectangle with the corner cut off at the very northern boundary of the developed basin. So David and William shut off the water about the time we purchased it. And then David's piece is a little bit to the south of there. He stopped watering those, I'll see, months ago. Those look a little crispier. It's a lot more brown. And so there's some cool aerial photos to show the impact of stopping the irrigation. And then there's some really good ones of the surface irrigation removal and pickup. Miles and miles and miles of that old, rusty, brittle stuff. I can't even imagine what dealing with that stuff is like, but tons and tons of, forklifts and 40-foot containers full and little dumpsters full, and a lot of work to remove the surface irrigation. And then maybe the most interesting would be the tree removal part. There's some different photos of the process in there, and David said there's 4,850 trees on the 155 acres of his grass-fed land. It doesn't count the William Bauer piece, which is 120 acres. So David's saying there's around 5,000 trees on the 55 acres that the David Bauer property. So just on that one piece, they literally bend over and get out the chainsaw and cut a few branches off, and then, you know, cut the tree, tip it over, and then come back and grind the stump down the ground level. So there's different pictures in there that show the tree being removed. And then there's one picture that kind of shows a white swath, and that is 4 rows of trees being cleared and the trees kind of piled up. On that freeway looking picture, it goes through the parcel, that is 4 rows that have been cleared separately, which I guess would make the picking up of the trees by the chipper much easier if they're consolidated in bunches as opposed to going up and down every row. Plus, if I got a big piece of equipment that needs to be able to fit through the trees, so if I had to allow the chipper to get through. So, you know, amazing work. God bless David Bauer. We had to do this. It would not look like that, for sure. We'd be doing the following big documents. And it would have been a big challenge for us, so thank you, David, for doing all this work before we even take ownership. 5,000 trees on just that 155 acres is mind-boggling to think about.
Are we gonna keep the runway?
We can. David didn't want the hangar back, though. They really, that was one of the assets he wanted back. There's a little, you know, aluminum building that just got the wings cut out and a little plane fits right in it. So he didn't want to do that, but the runway stayed. And then kind of in a related issue, I did meet Ray, Lennox, Danny McCamish, and Bree Fordham out there at the Bauer parcels last week, Thursday, I think it was, to look at kind of brainstorming in terms of what could any potential future uses be of the property. I was real clear to say, for our purposes, we're happy with what we're doing, and that meets our requirements. We can now transfer water rights once the fallowing is done, but my question to them as park experts, should that be the end of the story, or should there be further development? Not park life, but should there be future development of that property for other uses going forward? So the initial answer was probably. So that answer came in about 2 months ago. It took a while to actually have the meeting. We had the meeting. Ray's initial concern was about dust. If we start disturbing anything out there and regrading or doing anything to revegetate, that or no, the state becomes potentially liable for the dust problem that's created, and that's legitimate dust. That's why we're trying to not expose any land surfaces out there. We're trying to keep it to a bare minimum. We intentionally didn't tip the big trees over because we would have created a 20-foot dimple on 4,850 spots. And that last windstorm we had yesterday, that would have been about the first time it all ticked up, and we couldn't have seen anywhere. I couldn't have seen the mountains over there. So anyway, we're trying to avoid the creation of dust by using the techniques that Dave is using by leaving the roots in place. So, you know, actually the state parks folks might have some interest in some of the buildings out there. You know, there's a fairly large warehouse on the David Bauer property. There seems to be a lot of potential. I was real clear with them, the parks folks, that the district's not paying for any park activities. We'd love to get reimbursed for the fallowing activities. The, you know, the $1 million that's going to cost us to get to the point where they could revegetate or restore the land, whatever they decide to do. So we can't do that. It would be up to ABS and the park folks to figure out a funding source, and they know that wildlife conservation grant that we've been talking about for a long time. They know those people and have worked with that organization in the past. So that Wildlife Conservation Board is a potential grant source for restoration of the property. So that's a work in progress. That being Ray, Danny, Bree, in terms of their brainstorming, there's a better word for it. Anyway, brainstorming what future parks could look like.
So the chips, are they being spread? Wasn't that the idea?
No, right.
It looks like they are.
So there's actually no chips there on the site. So there might be some, you know, some pieces left over from the tree trimming itself, but all all the big trees have been moved to the side. The chipper comes in to chip the trees, and the chipper is gonna haul the chips off.
I thought we were gonna spread them for dust
Well,
control.
we're not impacting the soil, the surface soil like we did on Viking Ranch. They pushed all those, they tipped all those trees over. There's a dramatic cost savings by hauling the chips off to the cogen plant as opposed to.
Great.
$200,000, actually.
Is there a berm around that? Do they have a berm around
Yes.
it? And have we talked at all about, that's part of the restoration, I suppose, doing something with that berm?
And that berm is breached, and that's why they get the flood flows on the property periodically.
Yeah, I mean,
Kind of like our Viking Ranch.
right. And then I know there's fence, all the fencing will be removed eventually.
We're kind of strategically leaving it in for now, just so it's not an attract nuisance, and then the park folks can figure out.
I know what I'm remembering about fallowing. We're requiring that if people fallow, I think we're requiring them to leave the chips, I think. I think that's like in the
Fallowing
GMP.
standards are silent. We have to meet the fallowing standards, which is remove crops off the tree. If you really read the fallowing standards specifically, it doesn't even say remove the tree, which I know that's our intent. It was the intent to remove the tree, but it's just like about tree crop in the specific fallowing standard.
The fallowing standard in the GMP.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about, okay.
Well, I'm just, honestly, the irrigation was my big concern, because I think it's been an issue in the past for state parks, the inherent lands with that much.
Those little pieces never go away.
Yeah, they don't go away, they just break down more, and so I think it's great, and I suppose this will probably be the case study for following, as far as, what can be done. So, it's great, thank you, these pictures.
And, I could talk to David about retaining some of the chips.
Might want to talk to Travis Huxman with
Who's doing the following study for Prospect TA?
Land IQ
Land
and
IQ, I mean, maybe
DI, right?
put some on a corner or whatever, but based on the
Right.
recommendation, I don't know. I mean, that's the challenge, is that we have this, Land IQ is doing research on it, but we're following them, so.
Great.
But yeah.
Nothing's gonna happen for a few months, it's too hot, so, so we do have time to talk to the smart folks to see if we do need to change anything.
And the land disturbance was minimal, I like not disturbing the roots.
Yeah, well, T2 got lucky, they purchased that Bernanke property next door, and those trees have been sitting so long, when they tipped them over, it just snapped at the base. They didn't bring all the roots with them, so over time, the roots become brittle, and then they biodegrade, if that's the right word, that they go back into the soil.
If you're taking any public comment, I don't know if Rebecca would like to ask any questions.
Sure.
They absolutely are. Rebecca, please chime in.
Okay, well, I mean, my initial question has definitely been discussed, which was, does BWD have any plans to fallow beyond the minimum requirements in the negotiated settlement that are in this agreement? And belatedly, I added, also congratulations on this purchase. But then I thought Jeff was addressing it, but did I hear someone say Colgen was getting the chips? And my understanding is Colgen is Bill Berkeley's company. And I wondered if he's paying for them or just being given them, especially in light of Diane's question about whether that's part of the agreement to have those remain. So I'm just curious about fallowing, but I understand you guys are thinking a lot about it, which was sort of the impetus of my question.
Yeah, cool, but in terms of the cogen component, David Bowers contacted, negotiated, he's done everything. So there's been zero involvement from us about where the chips go and who's involved. I can find out exactly who the company is and just let the board know at the next board meeting.
And my impression is that set up north of, northeast of 86, up above the great big truck stop. That funny building, right? I think that's.
It almost looks like a power generation plant.
Right. Right. So what is Bill Berkeley saying? Becky, sorry.
Wait, I'm sorry, say that, ask that again.
You said Bill Berkeley owns a company?
Colgen, as far as I know, that's his company. Has been for many dozens of years or decades. But okay, um, you guys are paying for the fallowing, right? But it's just that David Bauer arranged it. Is that how it's working?
We are paying for
That,
it,
Jeff?
but David Bauer could do it cheaper.
Becky, as part of the transaction, David understood the fallowing requirements, and so he said, if you want to buy my property, I also want to do the fallowing, and you can pay me for that. And so we looked at pricing for other fallowing options, and he could actually do it cheaper than anywhere else. But as a result of that, that's the way the purchase and sale agreement is written, that he does it. And so
Right.
he made all the arrangements about all the, subcontractors he might hire to do it. He made all arrangements to do that, if that makes sense. He sort of whispered to us what he was doing, but it was up to him to deliver his land to us, meeting the following standards. Do you know what I mean? So he has to
Do.
give us the land, except for the first parcel, because it came to us too quickly, but he's doing that one first, and then every time he delivers us land in future years, it's already going to be fallowed. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
I kind of got that from skimming over the agreement just a few minutes ago, but I had a little trouble hearing everything that got said, but it sounded like some people thought it was better that the chips weren't there. And I thought I heard that the trees won't be there at all. And anyway, I'm just remembering property, whatever that company is that was looking into fallowing for BWD, talking about creating berms with trees for natural revegetation. But I didn't hear all of your conversations, so I don't want you to be forced to repeat everything. I just had a question about the fallowing because we all want uh, more to happen than just the bare minimum. And it sounds like Jeff's been talking with the park or at least ABF, and people have ideas. So unless anyone wants to comment on anything else, it's okay.
Are there any other questions, Jessica? No? Questions from directors? No. Thank you for the update. Yes. And that concludes our open session. So, gentlemen and ladies, how long a break do you want to take?